Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Learning Anchor Series, our next edition, where we'll continue to explore the intersection of learning science, technology, and innovation through conversations with people shaping the future of education and training. And today we are thrilled to welcome Jason Haag, a pioneer in the world of learning and development. With over 2 decades of experience spanning instructional design, learning engineering, and strategic leadership, Jason's been on the forefront of advancing distributed learning technologies and championing open standards to make learning systems more interoperable and effective. Now, from his influential work with the Advanced Distributed Learning Initiative, where he helped shape the future of mobile learning, to co-founding Veracity Technology Consultants, Jason has consistently pushed the boundaries of what's possible in digital learning. His deep expertise in standards like SCORM and XAPI have empowered organizations to build smarter, more connected learning ecosystems. So with that, I would like to welcome Mr. Jason Haag to our Q&A today. If you could hold our questions to the end of the presentation, so if you can just hold on to them, then we'll do a Q&A session at the end where we can get all of your questions answered. And with that, I'd just like to move over to Jason.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Really appreciate the wonderful introduction. Can you hear me okay in the microphone?
We have you.
Coming loud and clear. Okay, excellent. Well, I heard there's a mix of different leadership, technical, and training development officers here in the audience. So I'm really trying to tailor this presentation to be specifically focused on the exciting things we can do now with data and analytics that are relevant to learning and performance. I'm very passionate about this topic because developing insights from learning analytics is really at the core of our products and services at Veracity. And we see lots of organizations struggle with it. So let's get started. So here's the agenda. I'm really going to talk about measurement, evaluation, get into some different types of categories of measurement and evaluation, and show some dashboards and examples. And then we'll get into some other examples of data-driven insights and how you can improve content. And then I've saved some time for some brief stuff we've done with analytics and AI. I'm going to turn my camera off here just so I'm not distracted a little bit. Okay, so how is this presentation relevant to Learning and Engineering series? Well, learning engineering is a newer discipline, and it really requires expertise from multiple areas such as learning sciences, instructional design, systems engineering, software engineering, data science, but really everything heavily relies on using data throughout all the phases. So, for example, even during the iterative content creation phase here in this diagram, the data instrumentation part is really addressing how you develop your content to generate specific data in support of your reporting analytics, which also is an iterative process, by the way. You might also need to test and analyze the data multiple times before both the instrumentation and data collection parts are finalized and really meeting your reporting goals. So I'm going to cover ways to think about measurement and evaluation of the learning and performance data, which is widely applicable to all these phases in the learning engineering process. And I'll provide some example visualizations of how you can use this data for improving learning or learning conditions. So what are learning analytics? Here's a really well-known formal definition from the Society for Learning Analytics and Research, SOLAR. It's really about collecting, analyzing, interpreting, and communicating the data about learning that provides actionable insights to enhance learning. And so before I talk about getting into measurement strategy, I want to mention there's a technical standard used for collecting learning and performance data called the Experience API, better known as XAPI. This standard was created by the U.S. Department of Defense ADL initiative. That's the organization Stephen mentioned earlier in my introduction. I worked at the ADL initiative for around 9 years. XAPI was created around 12 years ago, and XAPI 2.0 became an official IEEE standard really just a few years ago. And so I won't get into really the technical details about XAPI or APIs and data formats here, but I just wanted to mention it because I may refer to that acronym occasionally throughout my presentation, and I also wanted to point out The main reason XAPI was created here in the first place is to provide a way to measure, collect, and evaluate learning and performance data in a standard way, not just for courses, but to support all types of content and the entire learning engineering process in your ecosystem. Would also like to call out one of the results here from this Learning Guild research on learning analytics recently because it's very relevant to this presentation. The lack of tools, resources, skills, and funding are some of the more obvious barriers you see here on the left. Some of those rank really high, but the highest one was a lack of a defined measurement strategy. That was really the biggest barrier at 66% for organizations implementing learning analytics. In addition, the survey also asked vendors what barriers their customers or clients needed to overcome in order to implement learning analytics. And the lack of a measurement strategy was also their top response at 71%. So this illustrates really a critical challenge we face today. Often organizations want useful reports, they want useful analytics, but they lack the data, they lack quality data, which is often the direct result of not having a defined measurement strategy. So if the biggest barrier to implementing learning analytics is a lack of a defined measurement strategy, it's important to first figure out how to improve this. So that's how I'd like to start off talking about what should drive measurement. This will heavily impact your data collection and data instrumentation parts of your learning engineering strategy. And for anyone that's interested, here's a link to the full report from the Learning Guild published on learning analytics. It came out in late 2023, I think September 2023, but it's still very useful if you want to check it out later. As I mentioned, Veracity collaborated on this with Torrance Learning, and the research was based on a survey that asked respondents about the following topics. What were some of the measures that you use? What are some of the types of analytics that are conducted? What data sources are commonly used? What data formats and standards are used? What software tools? What are some of each of the organization's original intentions and actual usage? And then, of course, barriers to implementation, which was the slide I showed you previously. Anyway, there's the link if anyone would like to check that out later. Very, very useful. So getting into a measurement discussion here, I'm sure everyone's heard of the famous quote, "You can't manage what you don't measure." Well, this holds truth. And if you invest some time in thinking about what you need to evaluate later on as a result of delivering your learning or training solution, this will make your measurement strategy become crystal clear. Evaluation, we're talking about evaluation here. This is actually the E part of the ADDIE model in ACRODAB. I'm sure most attendees here on this call are familiar with ADDIE. It's also, what I read, part of the Canadian Forces Individual Training and Education System, or the CFITES quality control process. So from my professional experience, in a lot of projects I've seen and organizations I've been involved with, the evaluation part has often been one of the most neglected or forgotten parts of the ADDIE model, especially in some of the U.S. government efforts I've worked with, because the content development is often contracted, and then once it's delivered, a deeper evaluation of the training effectiveness is not conducted because the contractors that design the content are no longer under contract or don't have access to the data. That's a common problem we see, not just in, I've seen the U.S. government, but in some commercial sectors as well. Ideally, evaluation should really be addressed and strategized in the beginning of your project, and your evaluation strategy should really inform the planning and analysis phase. So evaluation can also provide a feedback loop to help determine whether the learning or training is effectively doing the job it's designed to do. And it should also be a continuous iterative process. It's not a one and done event. So here's some broad strategic questions you can start off with that'll help inform your measurement strategy. What model or framework can you use? It's not a bad idea to start with an existing model or framework as your foundation. And the good news here is you can start with any framework that best suits your needs and really tweak it to fit your requirements. Another good question to ask is, who are the stakeholders? Who are the decision makers? They will ultimately help identify the business and reporting goals and help provide input into the evaluation criteria. The third question, what are the mission goals the training or performance solutions designed to support? Asking this will really help you identify the business impact measures. What problem or gap is the learning or training solution helping to address within your organization? And what are the reporting goals or requirements? Really asking this question up front will help you inform what you want to measure. For illustrative purposes, I have three examples of popular evaluation models or frameworks here. Kirkpatrick model, the Talent Development Reporting Principles Framework, and the Learning Transfer Evaluation Model, or LTEM. And I want to point out, before I get into this a little bit, it really doesn't matter what evaluation framework you use. I think most of you are probably familiar or heard of Kirkpatrick and Phillips return on investment. Well, the TDRP framework is complementary to that. It was originally developed by the Center for Talent Reporting, and it's really maintained by the Phillips Roy Institute now. It's basically the Kirkpatrick model combined with Phillips Roy, but with the addition of more resources for thinking about how to categorize the different reasons for measuring, and coupled with some standard measures and reports you can use. And the TDRP has like a library of over 170 L&D measures for efficiency, effectiveness, and outcomes, or measuring business impact. And in 2023, 52 of those L&D measures from TDRP were standardized and formally became an ISO standard, known as ISO 30437 there, also known as L&D metrics. And on the far right, we have the LTIM model. That's from Dr. Will Thalheimer, Workplace Learning, which has tiers instead of levels. This really focused more on transferring learning to the workplace and the effects of transfer, competence, and the feedbacks loops you need for more complete evaluation strategy. So as I mentioned, it really doesn't matter what framework you've used. I think these are three of the most popular ones out there. But one thing that these frameworks all have in common is that each of the levels or tiers are really designed to help you think more deeply about the things you should be measuring as part of your evaluation strategy. And you really need that type of strategic thinking in place from the very beginning to get the most out of your learning data and analytics. Here's an example table I put together that shows the framework side by side. I'm using the TDRP framework here as an organizing principle. In other words, like you say that if not all things you measure in LD really fall under three broad categories: efficiency, effectiveness, and impact. And measuring and evaluating business impact is where most L&D practitioners want to be or strive to be, but many are usually stuck in evaluating level two, the learner perceptions and feedback from surveys, or evaluating assessment results. Here are some of the examples of efficiency measures, and then I'll show some examples of dashboards. Let me get into just breaking these down a little bit. So what are efficiency measures? These are measures that help provide insights relating to quantity. They help answer questions about how much or how long, and they help inform and monitor things such as utilization and volume and reach or access. These types of measures, most of us in L&D are familiar with because some of the basic efficiency measures are commonly available in LMSs today, such as the number of course completions or the time spent in lessons or in courses. But with XAPI, now we can begin to think about more types of efficiency measures, such as some of those listed here, this really granular usage data, counting the number of activities, page views, time spent in files, opening files, looking at video, really granular video data, and so forth. Here's some examples of effectiveness measures. So what are effectiveness measures? These focus on learner reactions or perceptions, knowledge assessments, knowledge transfer, performance. These really provide insights into the quality of the learning content or program. I'm sure some of you all are familiar with these. Is a lot of the places we often get stuck in kind of level two, looking at survey responses or participant reactions, test time analysis, assessment, maybe comparing pre-test, post-test, that kind of thing, or individual responses. And here are some examples of impact measures. So what are those? They show the impact of the learning content towards a business goal. For example, what is the impact the training or learning solution has on sales or operations or on an example I'll provide in a little bit is cybersecurity operations. So these are just some examples of relating this to a broader impact on your business. A sound approach to articulating and these business goals and measures is to express them in the form of key performance indicators. And KPIs are crucial for communicating what is measured in like clear business language. They're really useful in setting benchmarks and targets too, so you can track their progress and show your training products are paying off. And writing out KPIs with this kind of SMART approach is also useful. Perhaps some of you have heard of this, but the SMART acronym really stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. And I'll show a few examples of these and then show some sample dashboards in support of these goals and KPIs. So let's set this up with a real world scenario here. The CIO of a company, let's imagine the CIO of a company must improve the level of cybersecurity preparedness of in-house IT personnel in order to reduce the cost of recurring incidents. Let's imagine there's some data breaches or different cyber attacks costing them a lot of time and money and security, of course. So let's turn this scenario into a smart business goal. We want to decrease the number of cybersecurity incidents by increasing the IT staff's knowledge, skills, and performance, and by achieving 100% certification of their IT staff. And now using that smart business goal, we can come up with some KPIs and break it down a little bit. In using the KPIs, we can clearly figure out what we need to measure. So I'll read a few of these out. Increase cybersecurity of IT staff by passing course assessments with 85% higher within 3 months. Some measures related to that KPIs, you can look at assessment pass rate or an assessment scores. The target there is you want an 85% or higher scores within 3 months. Another example, increasing cybersecurity skills of their staff by requiring practice of formal training exercises each week. You can look at some efficiency measures here, such as formal training completions, practice performance assessments, completing practice simulations, or going through some performance support procedures and tracking that. As you'll notice, not all of these KPIs involve XAPI. In the case of obtaining the certification, that data will likely be reported from a third-party system or maybe even a certification body like CompTIA or something like that. So, and then tracking the number of cybersecurity incidents is something that's measured and tracked internally also. That's not in your training, but maybe perhaps in your help desk or ticket tracking system. You'd need to combine that data with your training data to show that. So now let's look at a few sample dashboards that really illustrate this progress towards these KPIs. This is a sample efficiency dashboard that shows usage activity and task practice exercises, such as time spent viewing procedures, time spent completing checklists, viewing files, accessing specific areas of performance support resources, and things users were searching for. So as I mentioned previously, efficiency measures address usage and duration and help inform, monitor volume and reach. You can also look at time spent viewing videos as part of an efficiency dashboard. Look how this contributes towards the KPI requiring more hours of formal training each week. This is a sample effectiveness dashboard. Illustrates some knowledge attainment and passing assessments, such as a pre-test, post-test comparison, average passing and failing scores, average score of users that passed on the first attempt, for example. As I mentioned previously, these effectiveness measures focus on learner reactions, knowledge assessments, knowledge transfer, and performance. And so here's a sample kind of business impact dashboard that illustrates progress towards the KPIs using both the training data and then the real business data. So like I mentioned, you need to track like the number of cybersecurity incidents and some other tool, perhaps like a help desk system. I mentioned it earlier, or you can see this. So you can see this dashboard, and the number of cybersecurity incidents is decreasing while there's an increase in task practice and completing the training and getting the staff certified. So these are the types of dashboards you can create now to show kind of Kirkpatrick level 3, behavior change, and level 4 results, or kind of LTEM, tier 7 and 8, transfer and effects of transfer. I have some more to show you, but I first wanted to share this measurement resource we contributed to as part of the XAPI cohort year before last. Far too often in L&D, organizations aren't always able to develop an evaluation strategy. So I've really started off in these first slides with the ideal scenario where you can develop a evaluation strategy and KPIs, but that's not always possible, and not all organizations do it up front. And often stakeholders don't always know, if you ask leadership and other stakeholders, they don't always know what they want to see in the reports and analytics. So that's why this resource was created, collaborated with some other peers in our industry. The short URL is here below, but it's basically a listing of different efficiency and effectiveness measures that you can use to get started. And also includes what XAPI data elements you need to collect in order to support those measures. It also breaks down and shows what evaluation framework level or tier each measure supports, and what the target audience is who may be interested in these types of reports. So this is a useful resource to kind of get the thoughts stimulated, getting started, whether or not you have the extra time to develop your evaluation strategy up front. The previous dashboards I showed were really the types of data-driven insights you can get in support of your evaluation strategy, as I mentioned, but also proving the effectiveness of your content and using that data to show impact it's having on performance or other different aspects of your organization is really important for decision makers and leaders to see. But these other examples here are really going to show they're going to be related to usage and other insights for improving the content itself, which is a big focus for implementing a learning engineering strategy too. So this first one, what courses are being used or completed? This is a common metric you're probably already tracking if you have LMS and SCORM in your ecosystem. Here's another question you might ask. Perhaps you want to know what supplemental resources, internal links, or external resources are being accessed the most. This might provide some insights as to which resources are being clicked, but it might also identify when links go bad or change, and whether it's cost effective and practical to continue to maintain these types of resources and links within your training. You might also want to know what lessons or modules within a course are being skipped or used the most. Here's a pie chart that really shows those kind of granular parts of the course and which parts are being accessed the most. You might also want to know how much time your learners are spending on completing tasks, or how time is spent in a course, and the specific lessons or pages within a course, or content outside of courses. Now here's a sample screen capture looking at this data in one of our LRS tools. This is similar to the example cybersecurity scenario I provided earlier, where we wanted to measure the increase in time spent in learning activities and tasks. So for example, here you can see the total time a learner spent completing a lesson on neural networks for machine learning. And then you can also look at this in aggregate across all our learners too. If you need to know where learners are possibly having the most trouble in your content, you can look for patterns in the data and visualizations like this bar chart, which shows a specific module has had hundreds of attempts when compared to others. You can also see where students are having trouble by analyzing learning paths they take through the content. Learning paths can be used to help refine the courses over time, leading to better efficiency and use of students' time, and resulting possible cost savings here. So this visualization, you'll see the paths the student took through different units or lessons within a course. This type of visualization is called a Sankey diagram, and it's really possible now with XAPI because XAPI allows you to express those like parent-child relationships between content objects in the data. You might also be interested in video engagement. That's really a popular media and learning and training solutions nowadays. And you want to know whether your investment in video production for your learning or maybe your performance support solutions paying off. So you can look at general interactions, such as whether they enable closed captioning, within the video player, whether they changed the volume, they muted or changed full screen. You can track things like if they played, paused, or skipped or restarted. You can also see general progress, such as how much of the total video was viewed. As you can see here, only 51% of videos being viewed. That could lead to bad performance if specific objectives are covered in the video, or it can mean there's a technical problem with the video. So patterns like this serve as actionable insights to follow the data and investigate it even further. This is why a particular area or segment in the video is being watched. This could provide some insights as to whether there's something useful at this particular time code in the video, or maybe there's an intentional learning objective was taught or a specific training task is being performed. You can also dig a little deeper and look at the specific segments of the video. For example, here are several video histograms with a heat map visualization showing the most played segments across several videos. This type of visual really shows where specific segments are being replayed over and over again, and then those are highlighted by the lighter blue color. And then also it shows where students are dropping off, which are highlighted by the darker blue colors. You can create question level test item analysis to see how learners are collectively responding to questions, and this can help identify possible issues with the questions themselves or maybe the distractors, and then that can help improve the content design. So perhaps there's an assessment item that was not covered sufficiently in the training, and then that's why there's 0% of users are answering that questions correctly. So that's a nice feedback loop to improving the design. There's other aspects of content that design that can be improved by using data too. So for example, why are some resources getting 10 times more activity than other resources? Specific design elements may need to be changed, which can also lead to a better learning experience. Something as simple as a resource being presented with a button or animation versus a text-based hyperlink. That's just a simple example here, but I'm sure you can all imagine some others. You can also use gamification, create leaderboards and other elements to help improve the design and evaluate that data. This is a screen capture of a Navy virtual recruit tracker mobile app project that we worked on. And that app implemented an LRS and analytics to show activity in the app and then compare that to the sailor self-reporting of their physical activities, such as push-ups. You see curls here, BMI over time. So individuals could drill down and see their own dashboards also here in the LRS and their class rank on specific activities. Not allow them to see how they're doing, but also allow them to see how they're doing compared to other users or classmates. And research, has shown this can positively influence motivation to perform better. Here's another example you might want to consider with the data. So can I see overall usage? You may have a mix of different content types, not just courses, but LMS data, mobile apps, external systems. And you want to aggregate all that related data to see a more complete holistic picture. So here's an example of several graphs comparing different pieces of content across an ecosystem. Performance support data on the left is based on a Navy mobile tablet application performing maintenance tasks, procedures on watertight doors, and using that data and analytics, they could also investigate why maintenance wasn't performed within the recommended periodicity or why sailors stopped at a specific point and reported feedback. You could also look at whether higher repetition of task practice resulted in less dependency on the performance support solution over time, because now it's being committed to muscle memory. Anyhow, the point of comparing multiple data sources here is so that you can see real-time dashboards over all of your data across all your content in the ecosystem, not just for the courses coming from your LMS. Okay, I know there's a lot of interest in AI these days, so I have a few examples here. Also, what you can do today with some AI tools for data analytics. Um, is it possible to get benefits from AI in your environment today? Yes, yes. For example, we worked with OPM, Office of Personal Management, a few years ago on a project exploring the potential of machine learning to predict and improve learning outcomes by using XAPI data to predict uh, at-risk students. There was a long short-term memory neural network for predictive analytics used to analyze student interactions represented as XAPI data. The LSTM model achieved 78% accuracy in determining these outcomes, and this framework identified measures for at-risk students and also equipped instructors and administrators with tools to offer timely data-informed interventions, potentially increasing student success rates and so forth. That data included, by the way, over 18 million XAPI statements from over 130 students. Besides this machine learning project, we've also done some experimentation with AI tools with XAPI data for analytics and reporting. And this was based on three kind of core questions as part of this research. First was, how can you use AI tools to help analyze your XAPI data sets and your learning content? The second was, what are your options for generating visualizations, graphs over XAPI data using these AI tools? And the third was, what makes a poor quality and a high quality XAPI data set, including, where specific data model elements that should be used and when. So I evaluated several tools, but at the time, ChatGPT was really the only one that could actually import and analyze data and create visualizations for it. Most of the AI tools out there just allow it, are mostly creating text-based things or images or video. I was really curious if ChatGPT could come close to generating something similar to what I can create with a learning analytics platform, such as our LRS here, or Veracity Learning. So here's a bar chart that displays the actors with the most events. This is a graph that is generated out of our LRS over the data automatically. The LRS has a lot of default dashboards that just automatically render based on data that's in the system. So I was curious, if I fed the same data set to ChatGPT, would it be able to create something similar? And it did. Of course, I had to come up with a really good prompt to break it down. So kind of knowing a little bit about the data, knowing a little bit about what I wanted to see. My prompt was analyze this data set, generate a bar chart graph to show the top 10 agents. Those are like users in the data set that most frequently appear in statements, and give me a count of how many times they were found, and then use their name to display in the text beneath each bar in the graph, and then count how many times each agent appears in the statement. And that could be indicated by the height of the bar, which corresponds to the y-axis. So you have to have some kind of knowledge of X, Y, bar charts, some statistics language sometimes in these prompts for it to come up with something relatively useful, I found. I've just got one example here. I've actually have a whole nother presentation I could get into with all the different graphs and examples. I can share that out as a resource later if you want. But basically, one of the main things I found here in this prompt is like it didn't, if you see the graph on the left, it didn't know to use a specific property in the data model for their name. It just used the identifier. So I had to, revise my prompt a little bit. I said, hey, ChatGPT, use the value of actor.name property and not actor account name to display the actual name. And it actually came back and displayed it. Changed the color of the bar chart for some reason, but the result was better, of course. So I won't, I know we're running out of time. I want to save some time for Q&A here. I'll share those other examples I generated if there's any interest to later, just let me know. But I could, like I said, I could give a whole presentation on that topic of using XAPI and artificial intelligence together. I figure it'd be more valuable for the time today to share some of these lessons learned and caveats after talking to Matt and Bill and others from the team. That seems to be an area you are all looking to explore is AI. So, and this is an evolving field. So some of the things I found just in the past year, my research may have already been improved. So that it's something to keep an eye on. I'm sure it's going to improve too, just based on some of the limitations I found here. But the first one was really garbage in, garbage out. When you have a quality XAPI data set, the graphs that are rendered by generative AI tools like ChatGPT may closely match the ones provided in some business intelligence tools or learning analytics platforms you may use. But the results of your AI prompts will only be as good as the veracity of your data. So, pun intended there. This caveat really highlights the importance of using XAPI conformant LRS, also that passes ADL's LRS conformance test suite. Uh, what do I mean by that? Well, using an LRS will help you generate really high quality structured data, which in turn will be super beneficial for your AI efforts in the future. AI tools really love clean structured data. They can do some really cool stuff with it. Number two, second kind of caveat or lesson learned here, know your data and your prompts. So as I mentioned, you must really be familiar with both the data set and the data model, to ask really useful questions. You got to have a solid understanding of how to craft these detailed questions about the data in your prompts. And you really must have an idea of how you want that data represented statistically or visually. You need to know what types of graphs or charts really make the most sense for representing your data. Um, Last one here too is kind of size matters, I think. So one of the limitations I found was that the data set file sizes that we pulled in to these AI tools were restricted. So for example, I could only import a data file with 500,000 XAPI statements, and that was around 50 megabytes. I expect these limitations will improve in the future, like I was saying, as these massive AI data centers are being rolled out, especially in Texas. But there's that for now they seem to be very limited to these small data sets, and that was with a paid plan also. So that's all I had on the AI. I just wanted to share a few of those caveats. Real quick, too, there's this measures library had a few resources. Then I mentioned our LRS. It's an XAPI 2.0 conformant LRS. If you go to the ADL's website, you can see other products that are XAPI 2.0 conformant. Also, that's the latest version of the standard. It just came out a few years ago. How am I doing on time, Stephen? I think I'll stop there and save some time for Q&A.
Yep, we're down to about 20 minutes, so that's a great time for Q&A if you're all done.
Yeah, sounds good.
Oh, awesome. So I just want to remind people before we start that this presentation, the PowerPoint's available in the chat right now, and that the entire presentation is being recorded, and it'll move to our YouTube channel within a few days of us finishing up here. So if you have questions, please feel free to type them in the chat or to raise your hand, and we'll get to them as quickly as we can. And I will try and keep a very close eye out for who's asking. But I just quickly had a question of my own, Jason, just because it's come up kind of in the chat. But are there well, steps we can take in XAPI to ensure the privacy of our students, even though we're collecting data specifically on people? Is there particular steps you guys would recommend to make sure that we aren't violating their privacy?
Yeah, that's a great question. There as well in our specific learning record store, there are some privacy and data controls in place. You can do some things too, just depending on what your policy is. Do you mean by privacy also like PII data? Like you don't want that to be reported on if you want to kind of like anonymize the users?
But it seems like there's got to be a balance there because, for instance, if we're looking at student interventions with AI, we
Hmm.
want to be able to identify the specific student who needs the intervention, uh, but at the same time, we don't want to be collecting all of that information. so that we know that, exactly the results, what time of day that they're up and what time of day that they're sleeping, in case that becomes compromised at some point. So
Yeah.
is there a way to work around that?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. We've had some customers come up with a solution, which is you know, in XAPI, you have to have an identifier for each actor in a statement or each learner. And what we've seen some organizations do is they have like a spreadsheet they maintain separately, privately. Maybe the instructor does in a secure place that maps the identifier from the data to the actual person in the classroom, so they can know who to reach out to and go and help and apply that intervention.
Well, that certainly answers my question. Do we have more questions out there in the chat from anyone? Or again, feel free to raise your hand and we'll give you the mic and let you get started. In the meantime, anything else you'd like to, any other insights you could share with us, Jason? Uh, I think particularly on the AI aspect is really I'm finding interesting. So, do you know how that they're building models which are predictive with the XAPI data? Is it just feeding straight in and then looking at like is it looking at past and then comparing it? How's it structurally working?
So the machine learning project that I mentioned earlier was really focused on identifying students at risk, and so they have some algorithms for that particular model. I wasn't on that project, so I can't talk super deeply about it. But that particular model, the algorithms and everything it was designed to do was really looking at uh, do some predictive analytics. Mostly was it.
I understand. Oh, okay. And we have a question from Mr. Casper, if you'd like to take the mic.
Hey, Jason, it's Bill Railer here. I just wanted to thank you for sharing all of your knowledge. As you're tracking within C-ADL, we spent the last 2 years really focusing on implementing TLA systems and pushing TLA forward. This year, we're switching to the design side and learning engineering now that we have the supporting systems to support that activity going forward. We're really excited with the addition of AI to the piece so that we can actually start to move to prescribed learning, and just really curious, from your perspective on the engineering side, how we can actually make some of those moves in that area. And once again, I just really want to thank you for sharing your knowledge. For the D&D members that are on the meeting today, we are moving forward with a trial license of Veracity to be the optimal LRS as we look at the TLA stack and move that forward. So really wanted you to be aware of that side, and there will be more information coming in the fall as we move forward with our TLA implementation. Over to you, Jason.
Yeah. Hey. Thanks, Bill. That was great. Thanks for the kudos and the kind words too. Yeah. Using AI for kind of learning engineering, a lot of different pieces, as I mentioned earlier, in the design and the creation of the content, as well as collecting feedback and getting those iterative loops to improve the content design. It is all very iterative. I think some of the fun things you can do is start playing with those prompt engineering tools now. I found a lot of them, especially like ChatGPT. There's a lot of others that are all using kind of the open AI, the different language models that leverage open AI. They just have maybe a slightly different interface. But those are such a great starting point, just getting started and developing, for example, some of the KPIs or things like that I mentioned earlier. Um, and prescriptive things, as you mentioned, I on the XAPI cohort project I was involved in a couple of years ago, or year before last, we were using ChatGPT to also help us write the KPIs, based on some specific business goal. And then we also had it say, all right, take those KPIs and help us figure out what we want to track in XAPI statements. And it was pretty neat. Actually, it was a not completely 100% accurate, but it was a wonderful starting point. So that's a big caveat I have with AI, as I'm sure some of you have found, is like it is it is really awesome at getting you started and getting everything flowing. In terms of like coming up with prescriptive components, are you were you in TLA? Are you talking about like recommendations for learners, or can you elaborate a little bit more on that idea
Yep.
of using AI?
Exactly. That's what we are talking about. So we're really trying to get out of the course model and the regimented residential model and allow for students to progress through the system at their own pace with the support from AI on that side. While I'll have you, I'll just put a plug in for a Canadian vendor called quadc.io. We are currently with them on a trial right now. For those CAP members and D&D members that are interested in participating on that trial, please reach out to Captain Zach Ransom. He's the project manager on that activity and controls the licenses for quadc.io. Back to you, Jason.
Yeah, that's exciting. There's some other tools I'm starting to see. I don't know if you guys have kind of surveyed the landscape of content authoring tools also out there in the e-learning ones, but I'm starting to see some like Spark Learn and some others start to add a lot of AI capabilities into the design, content design process. So helping you come up with the learning objectives or the assessment questions and supporting the content. Again, great starting point in that part of the process. In terms of like the recommendation engines and capabilities from AI, I haven't. That's great. Thanks for that project. Maybe put in the chat. I haven't heard of that company, but I could see there being some really good use of that as well. I just haven't had any personal experience with those types of capabilities or using AI for those types of capabilities myself personally.
Okay, and do we have any other questions or comments from our audience today? In which case, I am gonna why don't we wrap this up early and we will all go for lunch, which I think is have paramount on some people's minds, I think. But before we wrap up, I just wanted to thank you, Jason. And I definitely, as I look around our room here, I see I saw a lot of faces light up when you mentioned using XAPI data to integrate with our AI projects and be able to find predictions. That seemed to be really, really exciting. I also think we have another comment from Matt, so I'm going to go straight over to him and go ahead and activate your mic, and I'll be quiet for a minute.
It's Phil again, Stephen. I just wanted to put a plug in for our next speaker for the Learning Engineering Speaker Series, which will be Andy Johnson from USADL. And that will take place in the fall when everyone comes back from a well-deserved summer leave. So please enjoy your summer leave wherever you are across the country. And we look forward to seeing you again in the fall.
Yeah, we are currently scheduled for Thursday, September the 11th. We will definitely email you with more information on that as soon as we can. And Andy Johnson from the USADL will be a fascinating speaker. So thank you everyone for joining us here today. Thank you again, Jason. Great presentation. And I just want to say personally, have a great summer, and we'll see you all in the fall. Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much. End event. Yeah, that's right.